Hey sis, welcome or welcome back to Notes on Black Women. I am the Black Woman essayist and I'm so glad I caught you here today. This week's video essay is something that comes from the archives. This is something I wrote in about 2023, 2024, and it's actually April 2026 at the time of me recording this. The reason why I'm sharing it with you now is because Toni Morrison, we all know, is a wonderful and fantastic writer. But I recently went to a book club, which was over in New York. I did this virtually by Zoom, and we were discussing one of her other books called Paradise. It brought me back to this book here, which I'm going to share with you today, The Bluest Eye. Although this was Toni's first novel, so many parallels can be drawn from things that she highlighted or the little nuggets of wisdom she tried to drop for us then, still today in the 21st century, when we think about how little black girls learn to hate themselves, the Black Manosphere, the list is endless. There's so many parallels that can be drawn. So stay tuned, take a listen to this, and I'll catch you at the end for my final commentary.
Hey sis. Last week, to celebrate Women's History Month from a Black perspective, I entered Toni into the Encyclopedia of Black Women. And I also promised to share this essay I wrote a while back, maybe a year or so ago, following my thoughts after reading her first novel, The Bluest Eye, from 1970. If you tuned into today's Daily Notes for Black Women on Substack, the subject was self-assurance versus confidence, and Toni is a woman, I would say, who was deeply self-assured. It didn't show externally, it was in her pen, and I deeply admire her for this. Three things stayed with me since I read Toni Morrison's first novel, The Bluest Eye. Apart from her talent as a writer, I was struck by the subtle messages she gave us that in many ways still manifest themselves in society today. Firstly, beauty standards. Toni's messages about beauty standards, how these can be internalized and impact a person's life, along with other things society places value on, became very clear once the characters are looked at deeply. I concluded that when we don't see beauty or value ourselves, this can quickly turn into self-hate. Number 2, social programming. Social programming is clear in each of Toni's characters in this novel, and it really stayed with me. It's almost a pandemic in today's society. Thirdly, how men learn to hate women. What we see in spaces like the Manosphere on YouTube, along with messages black women have received from men like the late Kevin Samuels and Andrew Tate, feeds into some of the men's distaste that they have for women. The sad part is, it's not just the women who suffer. They may not realise it in their moments of madness and their hate for women, but men also suffer, just like the male character in Toni's novel. These problems are shown not just in the main character and focus of the novel, Pecola Breedlove, but also through the actions, thought processes and experiences of her mother, who is Pauline Breedlove, and her father, Cholly Breadlove. If we look closely, we can observe how these characters' problems and experiences are still prominent today, even in the 21st century. Pecola Breedlove, programming from childhood. In the viewpoint of Pecola Breedlove's childhood mind, beauty is found in having the bluest eyes. Literally, she wished to have these rather than her own, so she could walk through the world and through life with the experiences of a little girl who has blue eyes, rather than her brown eyes, which she has as an African American girl. While the book was published in 1970, the events take place in 1940 to 1941, 83 years ago at the time of me writing this, which is important when we look closely at how Pecola's experiences still manifest today. Pecola's view on what is beautiful or better, we see very early on, and how this viewpoint could have been created for her. In the scene where Pecola selects candy for herself at the local store, she decides to spend her 3 pennies on Mary Jane's. These are a type of candy. The reasons she chooses these are not for the taste of the sweet stuff itself either. Toni writes about the picture on the candy wrapper. She says, "Smiling white face, blonde hair in gentle disarray, blue eyes looking out at her, out of a world of clean comfort. From a very young age, Pecola is aware of what society deems as beautiful in quotation marks or desirable in quotation marks to have just via the packaging of candy for kids. She does not see herself on the candy or anyone who looks like her. What is also interesting about this wording that Toni has used to illustrate the life experiences that a little girl with blue eyes might have is a gentle life of cleanness and comfort. Toni goes on to write, to eat the candy is somehow to eat the eyes. Eat Mary Jane, love Mary Jane, be Mary Jane. 3 pennies had bought her 9 lovely orgasms with Mary Jane. Lovely Mary Jane, for whom the candy is named. How Pecola's experience has manifested in society today. The love, in quotation marks, the world has for Mary Jane and little girls who look like her is something Pecola is conscious of. If we fast forward less than 10 years from the period of Pecola's story, we can verify the authenticity of Pecola's viewpoint in the study by sociologists Keith and Mamie Clark, which was published in 1947, called Racial Identification and Preference in Negro Children. So if you are catching this on Substack, I will link that direct research in this written version of the essay. If you are over on YouTube listening to this, I will put it in the description box. So young children were handed dolls, both black and white, then asked their opinion on them. For example, which doll was good or bad and which one would they rather play with, etc. The results showed that the majority of black children preferred the white dolls to the black ones. Their comments on the black doll generally were that it was the bad one in quotation marks. The Clarks, who carried out the study, concluded that the children who were black had absorbed a sense of inferiority compared to white children. Or to put it more blatantly, black skin was inferior to white skin to a group of children who had not even hit adolescence yet. At this time, the study was cited to help end segregation in schools in the USA. Clearly, Pecola fell into this mix of young black children. Clearly, Pecola fell into this mix of young black children with an inferiority complex, developed from what society, in all its manifestations, even candy, had fed to her. What this shows us from literature and research, children are very susceptible to picking up on what's deemed as valuable in quotation marks in society, and how children interact with the world and view themselves is key to their well-being. So parents still need to instill not only the love for themselves and their black skin, but also tolerance for others into the young minds of black, brown and majority children. Considering how femininity is viewed for black women, which I do discuss in my essay, How We Take Back Control of Black Women's Femininity. And if you are on Substack, again, this will be directly linked into this essay. And if you are on YouTube, then the video may pop up somewhere in the right-hand corner as I'm speaking now. Young black girls would benefit from additional teaching to appreciate the blackness that they hold and the power and beauty that comes with it, rather than seeing it as their downfall as Pecola did in The Bluest Eye. Young black girls need to be taught that they are beautiful and they definitely are valued. On another part of the spectrum, looking at the challenges for young minority girls who are Korean, the teaching should include that they are not less valuable than men, as I also discussed in one of my essays called Where Culture Meets Feminism, How Patriarchy Oppresses Korean Women, as well as being shown that they are also loved for who they are. Since all the children in the novel were exposed to the same social programming, Pecola's interaction with other children did nothing but reinforce her inferiority complex and increase her desire for blue eyes and all that she imagined would come with having blue eyes. One very powerful example of internalized racism in children in Toni's novel is in this scene. In one scene where we follow a group of young black boys teasing one of the girls, the teasing is rooted in the skin tone of the young girl. And the main reason for their attack is the girl's family habits. So Toni writes that they themselves were black, or that their father had similar relaxed habits, was irrelevant. It was their contempt for their own blackness that gave the first insult its teeth. The message we can take from Toni's writing on Pecola is that there's a clear call for action for me as a reader of Toni's work. This call is for myself, caregivers of young black girls, and other black, brown, and minority females who interact with younger minority girls to help them see who they are and actually see their own beauty. Media, society, and influences we indulge in need to be selected with care in order not to disrupt the young developing mind of black, brown, and minority girls, to place them on a track that reduces their self-love and their self-value. This is because in society, the media, etc., beauty is not often seen in anything that has any kind of melanin in it when it comes to women. I have discussed this in The Beauty Standard Has Shifted to Black Women, which is another one of my essays that you can check out on Substack. This is not to say that other women are not beautiful, because they certainly are and they can be. However, as a black woman in the world, myself, even if I am a black woman who is not on the darker side, I am not blind, I am not deaf, and I do not ignore what goes on and what happens to women who do have a darker hue. I have noticed the mistreatment, the downgrading of black women generally, but especially those who are darker skinned. This is not acceptable, especially when it comes from within the community of black people. Reading Toni's work, this is the lesson I took from her writing, as Pecola is clearly a darker skinned girl. Moving on to the second character, we have Pauline Breedlove. What we look at here, or what I observed, is how women learn a lack of self-love. At some point, Pecola herself would go on to become a woman. We don't fully see this in the novel that Toni penned because the ending is wrapped up in summary, but we know that this is likely to happen. Based on her experiences, point of view, and mindset regarding how blue eyes and all that comes with them would be a better experience for her rather than being who she is, Pecola's life could pan out just like her mother's, Pauline Breedlove. Her mother is an excellent example of how women can learn a lack of self-love and value. In the novel, Pauline has a very distorted idea about what it is and what is not valuable. Clearly, we are all different and everyone does hold different values. That said, Pauline Breedlove found value in, firstly, men and someone to love her. She was not a whole person alone. Secondly, white children, and this would be the white children of the family she worked for. We can see from these two areas that everything Pauline Breedlove desired and saw as value was outside of herself. She didn't show a shed of love for herself. So would it be fair to say that this is a woman who lacks self-love and is unsure of how to find it within herself? Or maybe she isn't confident in who she is? I would say so. Toni gives us a wonderful insight into how Pauline found herself here in her experiences way before she became Mrs. Breedlove. From the age of 15, Pauline was a girl who liked to keep house, in quotation marks, as Toni put it, and keep things in order. In today's age, we might see her as a very OCD person. Toni shows us how Pauline liked to behave, which was to line up tins of food and to have everything in a specific order. So on the other hand, part of this behaviour Pauline had as a young girl could have been due to a lack of control over her own life and destiny. And this is where she found control, by organising tin food in a specific order. The other insight we gain into Pauline: as a young woman, she began to see value in the opposite sex, as if they, meaning men, were something that would validate her as a human being rather than having her own validation. So Toni writes in her novels, fantasies about men and love and touching were drawing her mind and hands away from her work. We then go on to follow Pauline's story as she starts to vividly imagine a man whom she describes as a simple presence, an all-embracing tenderness with strength and promise of rest. On the face of it, it seems fine to dream of a man who allows her to rest, in quotation marks. However, when this man appeared in her life, and that would be Cholly Breadlove, Pauline was so lost in her lack of self-love and self-worth, she didn't recognise that she was dealing with an emotionally and physically broken man. Here's something important here: what research actually shows us. So Psychology Today, in their article, The Truth About Women and Self-Esteem, they claimed that in a 1991 study by the American Association of University, women announced that girls lose their self-esteem on the way to adolescence. The study also stated that in 2002, the Girl Scouts Council launched a program to address the critical nationwide problem of low self-esteem among adolescents and pre-adolescent girls. Popular books claim that before adolescence, girls have a range of interests and strong opinions about the world. As they enter dating age, however, girls lose their voice as they confront demands to become subservient and silent in order to attract males. They stifle their opinions, personalities, and interests and instead pretend to be what they think boys want them to be. What's interesting is that this research was then challenged later on. The study by the American Association of University Women was refuted by subsequent studies using large samples and better measures of self-esteem. One study of over 100,000 individuals found that girls' self-esteem does not fall at adolescence, and although girls are more anxious about their appearance than boys, there are no differences between girls' and boys' self-esteem in academic matters, and girls have higher self-esteem than boys in moral, ethical matters. Also, the study claimed that the girls who lose their voice in adolescence were based on case studies of girls who were seeking psychotherapy for mental health problems, and the interviews were with girls but not with boys. The two different studies offer two different findings, and those were direct quotations from the studies. And if you are on Substack, they will be linked directly into this essay. If you are listening on YouTube, I will link them in the description box. The two different studies offer two different findings. It's not surprising based on who the sample of participants in the studies were. Why the former findings are relevant in the context of Pauline Breedlove's experiences as a young woman is because she was a woman who needed mental health support. It could be well argued based on how Toni Morrison portrayed her as a character. So she fell into this category of girls. Given this, we can assume that the 1991 study would be relevant to Pauline. She did not have interests while younger, as Morrison noted in her book. What she wrote was, still keeping house but not as enthusiastically when she arrived at the age of 15. So clearly we can see here from Toni's writing that Pauline did lose interest in what she liked, and this turned into seeking validation outside of herself. Enter Cholly Breedlove. Her life is then set on a track of abuse, lack of self-worth, and seeing value in all that does not look like her. She preferred to keep a good house, in quotation marks, for the white family she worked for, while she allowed her own house and her own home to fall apart. She treated the tears of the little white girl she cared for as more important, valid, and right, in quotation marks, than the tears of her own black daughter. She saw no value in Pecola or any woman who looked like her, which included herself. We see this clearly in the scene when Pecola comes to her mother's place of work, which would be the white family's home that she worked in, and a simple accident happened. A pie fell on the floor. The little girl of the family Pauline cared for was so startled by this and by the presence of black children. The little girl's tears resulted in Pecola being slapped very hard, and the little white girl was coddled, reassured, doted on for her tears, and Pauline's treatment of her daughter shows us that she was seeing no worth in any female that looked like her, even if this girl came from her own womb. What we can learn from this character in the modern day is that seeking validation as a woman can be detrimental if we seek it in men. Other women who do not look like us, or their offspring, whom we hold above our own children. A woman like this ends up bitter, just like Pauline, neglectful, just like Pauline, and she carries on a line of abuse towards others, just like Pauline. To draw from modern examples, we saw this in the movie Precious from 2009. The actress Monique's ability to portray a character who is the equivalent to Pauline Breedlove, considering how Pauline Breedlove's mindset impacted her daughter and herself, along with where a woman like this would find the ammunition needed to morph into a woman like Pauline, became spaces like the Manosphere, men like Kevin Samuels when he was alive, and Andrew Tate, Attell. All these men should have no credibility or power or effect on a woman's self-worth. If we look at this closer and why I actually say this, in the novel, essentially, it was a man who paralleled these modern spaces that we have today. So if we think of Kevin Samuels, Andrew Tate, these kind of men here, the equivalent in the novel was her husband. This would be Pauline's husband, Cholly, whom she indirectly learned some of her behaviours from. So by this, what I mean is the messages that men like Cholly Breedlove, or people and men in the Manosphere, Kevin Samuels, Andrew Tate, Attell, all these men give or gave to women must be ignored or deemed as false and destructive programming, because it is. Finally, the last character, Cholly Breedlove, and how men learn to hate women. Cholly Breedlove, the male character in the Bluest Eye, is like an old school member of the Manosphere that we've got today, but just living in the 1940s. His learning of hatred for women possibly started when he was just a few days old. In the novel, when he was abandoned by his mother, while I'm in no way saying that a man who experiences this will turn into someone like Cholly Breedlove, it was at this point that the author, Toni Morrison, showed us that this is where he started to see women as a problem for him personally. This manifested later in his life when he had his first experience of love. He was caught with his pants down, having sex with a girl by a group of white men who humiliated the couple. So Cholly internalized this, and rather than having a dislike for the men and holding the malice that he has towards them, he saw the black female as the problem, in quotation marks, who caused him his humiliation. If it had not been for her, he would not have experienced what he had, according to how Toni Morrison's storytelling went. What Cholly forgot, and this is key, is that the girl was also experiencing the same humiliation. He could not allow himself to see that. As black people, they were both experiencing racism, humiliation, and subhuman treatment at the hands of white men. To Cholly, however, the girl was the problem, even though she didn't participate in his shaming. In the scene where the white men forced Cholly to continue having sex with the girl he was with, while they watched and humiliated them both, this is what Toni writes. Cholly, moving harder and faster, he looked at Darlene. He hated her. He almost wished he could do it. Hard, long, and painfully. he hated her that much. We then go on to learn that Cholly held on to his hate for this woman that turned into hate for all women, even though he was upset with something that men did to him and her. He took it out on women instead. This kind of projection happens all the time in the modern day, as when people in the manosphere, or I should say men in the manosphere, complain about women's standards for dating. I'm one of the women that they complain about all the time. I'm cool with it, and so should you be if you're one of these women too. People in the manosphere will happily tell women things like, you should expect less, you should tolerate having less and being treated as less. Be our ride or die woman and clean up our mess and problems, and that's your role as a woman. You can advocate for us, build us up, in quotation marks, as they like to say, and even provide for us, but we won't return that energy or protect you. They also tell us things like, I want you to submit to me, be a traditional woman, but guess what? I don't have a traditional man's money, so I need a 50-50 relationship. Make that one make absolute sense, because it can't. They also carry on things like, your hard work, your degree, education, it all means nothing if you don't have a man. And by the way, you should take a man that has achieved less, is worth less, and can't treat you right, but take him anyway, as that's your role as a black woman. Finally, one of the things that they love to tell us is, you're masculine for all your achievements and masculine because you don't take our rubbish. Men in the manosphere give constant and consistent messages of how they don't see value in women, especially black women. They also hate that women these days have rights, money, don't need to be tied to a man that does not know how to treat them. They blame feminism for women's refusal to be mistreated and settle for bums. They want to go back to a time when women didn't have rights, jobs, homes, money, independence, and all women were traditional, in quotation marks, women. This is a way to control women and to get away with abuse, infidelity, or however else they might want to mistreat women. What these men forget is that women have standards now and refuse to listen to their messages or do as they say due to what men have done to women in the past. Women's personal experiences of mistreatment have caused a shift in thinking, feeling, and what they actually will and will not accept. The manosphere and their messages are the problem for women. Not all men are like this. Granted, we know, but we all know the ones who are. That said, the experiences women have had has led them to set standards that they won't lower. Men need to remember that and adjust their behaviours. So how all this relates to how men learn to hate women? Well, if we go back to Toni's novel, men like Cholly are fearful of other men. They don't want confrontation with them, so they aggress on women. That's where they get their kicks. Males in the manosphere don't want to challenge other men about how they show up in the world. It's the same thing, especially concerning their treatment of women. So they blame the women and the standards, in quotation marks, that they won't lower, which is girl code for, I'm not taking this shit anymore. So we can see there are some very close parallels here between Cholly's hatred for women in this novel, set so many years ago, and the modern day manosphere and their hatred for women, which is actually quite shocking. What's mind-blowing is that Morrison's novel was written over 50 years ago at the time of me writing this. So how Cholly develops as a man. Cholly doesn't really go on to be a desirable man based on the author's storytelling and what Morrison showed us, but he does go on to try to find his father, and he is deeply disappointed when he learns that his father is no better of a man than he is. Cholly's father has multiple children all over the place and doesn't give the mothers any kind of financial support. He's a very unsavory character to read about in the novel, so much so that Cholly soiled himself and fell asleep under a bridge on the day that he actually finally met him. But does he look to his father, a male who disowned him, for any part of his own lack of development as a man? Nope, he does not. He lays it all on the feet of the women in his life, just like we see in the Manosphere today. Cholly blamed his mother, his grandmother who stayed and looked after him, and of course his wife Pauline and their daughter Pecola. Cholly's eventual downfall in this novel. Cholly takes it upon himself to, I'm going to spell it out here for YouTube safety, to our word, daughter, Pecola. And towards the end of the book, it appears that from the storytelling that Toni did here, that he justified this as she appeared as innocent as his wife once did on the riverbank on the day that he met her. What was Toni's message here possibly? What was she trying to show us? For me, the message Toni was possibly trying to give her readers is that when it comes to men like Cholly who have a dislike for women, this disdain can disrupt their ability to remember that they are a father, like Pecola's father in this context, Cholly, and their daughter is not a female to have sexual relationships with. Because of their dislike for women, how a particular woman is related to this man is disregarded in this context. So overall, the novel, The Bluest Eye from 1970, shows us three different narratives. Firstly, that when a black person has a distorted view on what beauty is, and that it is not or cannot be found in themselves, and that's what they believe, it turns into self-hate. That was the first message I believe Toni was giving us. The second narrative here is that this can be hate for the self, like Pecola, what we saw in the novel, and also be extended to hate for anyone who looks like yourself, as we saw in Pauline's story. Toni also showed us clearly that men who hate women often do so because they hold the woman at fault for the troubles that they endure and are not willing to do the self-reflection needed to take responsibility for these troubles, nor to hold other men accountable, since that may be placing them at a disadvantage. To me, this appears that some men are really just scared of other men. That's the message that I took from her writing when she portrayed this character, Cholly. So it's a very deep book and it's a very enjoyable book. And you let me know, have you read the book? What did you take from Toni Morrison's messages? And if you are listening in here on YouTube, then thank you so much for staying with me if you've made it this far. Please do consider subscribing if you like this kind of content, and you can also join me for free over on Substack, where I write weekly about different various topics that are always focused on black women. And if you are someone here who is listening on Substack, then thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you. All the links to the research and any further essays that I have mentioned will be in the description box if you are on YouTube. You can also find the link there to Notes on Black Women on Substack, and if you are on Substack, anything else that you wish to go back over will all be linked in this essay. I will catch you in the next one. Much love, the Black Woman Essayist.
Hey sis, so what did you think of that? Do you agree with me or not? Can you draw the same parallels that I drew from Toni's work to the 21st century and what black women are going through now? Have you read the book? Let me know in the comment sections. Did you see anything else that I missed? Toni was a fantastic writer, we all know that. And one thing I would say about her is that there's always something to learn from her books. Her books actually demand the reader to come to her with a certain amount of seriousness. Like, you know, it's like you have to really pay attention to what it is that she's showing you. Wonderful, wonderful woman. So anyway, give me your thoughts. Let me know, what is your favourite Toni Morrison book if you are a fan of hers? Do let me know in the comments because I do love her work, but there are a few that I haven't quite got round to reading yet. So if you've got any pointers, let me know. And if you do like content like this, then why not subscribe? I'd love to see you here again. You know, it'd be great to come back and meet you here. You can also join me over on Substack, which is where I spend a lot of my time. There will be a link in the description box below. And I also want to put a quick shout out as well, because at the time of me recording this, We are approaching May. It's the end of April now, and our next Black Women's Circle will be happening on the 31st of May. Now, if you don't know what this is or what this is about, I will put a link in the I'll put a link in the description box, and there will probably be a video pop up here somewhere, one of the corners as I'm talking, which will give you details on how April's Women's Circle went, so you have an idea of what happens. And come along and join us. Doesn't matter where you're from, nationality, the only thing is being Black and female. So I'll love you and leave you for today. I'll catch you in the next one. Much love, have a great week, and I'll see you soon.